The reason we're here today is to hear directly from Carol Ruckdeschel, who's a scientist and author, and she is on the island as our volunteers are right now. Our team on the island is also experiencing some inclement weather that's affected today's broadcast in length and quality. Our determined volunteers managed to send a video while in the wilderness right before a really big storm in order to bring this program to you today. While we had to pivot this afternoon, we definitely expect much better weather for tomorrow's live broadcast directly from the island. I just want to say thank you to our unshakable volunteers for making sure we receive the content for today. And we appreciate our viewers and your support and understanding. All right. Carol Ruckdeschel first visited Cumberland Island in the 1960s as a research assistant at Georgia State University. She took up residence on the island in the early 1970s and has dedicated her life to its study. During her career, Ruckdeschel organized the Sea Turtle Stranding Network, reporting dead or injured sea turtles, which was later taken over by the National Marine Fisheries Service. She has served as a researcher and observer for sea turtle nesting surveys, the Smithsonian Institution, U.S. National Park Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. Ruckdeschel is the author or co-author of numerous articles and books, including Sea Turtles of the Atlantic and Gulf Coast of the United States and A Natural History of Cumberland Island, Georgia. Joining Ms. Ruckdeschel from Cumberland Island is Jessica Howe-Edwards, the Director of Wild Cumberland.
Close inspection, nothing beats it. It's just so exciting. Everywhere you go here is exciting. You see something new.
We are here on Cumberland Island with Carol Ruckdeschel, and some of the folks who are watching may not have had an opportunity to visit the island or be familiar with it. So can you describe for them what they would encounter here or help transport them to where we are right now?
Cumberland is Georgia's southernmost and largest barrier island. And a barrier island, they're not everywhere, all along every coast, but here we have a strong surf and it protects the island from the ocean, essentially, especially an angry ocean. And so they're really very, very important. They're delineated by rivers coming down. So there's one river on the south end, one river on the north end. And when you come over, you see the famous Georgia salt marshes, which spread forever, and they're really beautiful and very productive habitats. And then at Sea Camp, you enter the magnificent maritime forest, which is truly awesome. And crossing over to the beach, you go through some little wetlands without tree cover, open, part of the dune system, and then the vast beach with no development. And it's pretty special.
Carol, you have lived on and studied Cumberland Island for more than 50 years. I'm wondering what specifically, though, inspired or motivated you to write the book that we're here to talk about today?
Well, when I came, there are naturally a lot of questions I had about the animals and plants, and so I began amassing all the literature I could on the subject and trying to learn it myself. And then after 20 or so years, 30, it's like, well, I've got so much information that is pulled together nowhere else, and I just felt obligated to do that, obliged to do it.
Yeah. Well, it seems like, this is a scientific resource. I think sometimes people might go to the library and select something like this off the shelf and expect to read it from cover to cover, but it's not really meant for that, is it?
It's more a reference book. The first few chapters are readable, but the others, unless you want to know details about a specific animal island that's found on the island, such as reproduction and diet and all that, that's what the species accounts cover. So it would be rather dry unless you were pretty intensely interested.
But it is comprehensive. You
Yes.
cover everything from the geologic history to the naturalists who preceded you. You've got, like you said, species accounts of all kinds, but you've even got some photos and maps in there. So, and I think we'll take a look at some of those as we go on. But
Yes.
it really is, the most, I think it gives the broadest perspective about the ecology of the island that I'm familiar with and that seems available to the public.
That's true, absolutely true, because that's what caused me to have to amass all this information. It just wasn't available in one place.
What was your writing process, your editing process like? Because, I'm sure at the time that you began this book, most of your sources were paper, and this was sort of pre-digital age. And, so what was that like for you?
It was very easy because that's all I knew. I mean, I'm not very good on the computer. I can do it, of course, type, and I had a typewriter. But I still I'm a pencil and paper gal. I just start writing it, and then even shift whole things around, and because I'm not basically a trained writer. So I figure there's only two reasons you write: because you're creative and can write well, or you have something to say.
Hopefully both.
Well, yeah, but I can't claim the.
Oh, I don't know.
I have something to say, but that's about it.
Well, it seems like, then obviously, you use pen and paper.
Yep.
But did you find that process, the actual writing process, energizing? Was it exhausting? Because you had so much information to share. Was it
Yes.
fun to go back through and?
Well, I did it just like one species at a time or one ecosystem at a time, and it was cathartic, really, to get it. Once it was down, it was a relief because, okay, I've pulled it together, that's a start, and I can work from there. So it was kind of exciting and exhilarating to see it finally in a different form, a new form, even though some of it was other people's information about, say, a certain tree species or something. But then I put all my observations on top of that, and so it was really fun.
Well, and your observations are different, when you're intimately involved with the place.
Yes.
But you obviously would rather be out in the field.
Oh, of course, yes. That's where I prefer to learn, yeah.
But you mentioned some things in this book that are really interesting and that maybe you sort of mention in passing, but I think myself and other folks may have questions about some of those things. So I specifically, there's a lot of talk about, obviously, whales these days for obvious reasons, but you, even as early as 1982, were finding those animals on our beaches. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you came across those animals. And then maybe we can talk a little more and see some pictures.
Sure. Well, I do a weekly beach survey for just, which is of course just baseline data.
What does survey entail?
Entails on an ATV driving the entire beach from the north point all the way down to the south end and around the south end. As it takes 2 hours. I mean, because I go slowly, because I'm looking for things. But it started out just looking for sea turtles, dead sea turtles, to document the magnitude of turtle mortality. But then it was like, well, why just do that? If you're going to do it, do all vertebrates.
Collect as much data as you
and
can.
then I had to do marine mammals because they're large animals, and nobody at the time was keeping up with that. Dead marine mammals. And so I did it. I started doing it, and then a little later I said, well, why just marine mammals and turtles? Why not do all vertebrates? So then I ended up doing all vertebrates, which is just to document it. But it provides a baseline and from which you can judge changes, trends, many things. So it's valuable data. Well, it's only been for 40 years, really. The first years I had to work on a place to live.
So that's how you discover items typically, is on your survey.
Yes.
Most typically. And there's some images. So we pulled some special slides from Carol's personal collection to share with you today, and related to some of these things. So we have some of whales, and I thought we're going to work hard to make sure that all of you watching will be able to see these images. If not today, then in a follow-up. But I wanted to take a look at some of these with you, if you're comfortable with that. I'll pass these to you, and we have a slide viewer here. And I may even try to show you how this goes. So let's see if I can pull this in for our friends at home as you look. So Carol, why don't you tell us a little bit about maybe how you discovered this animal and what happened when you did?
Well, it was on the beach, but it was alive. You can see the depression that its head is in. And it's a rare whale, a beaked whale. There's not much known about them because they're elusive. They stay offshore, way offshore, and difficult to get information on. And this one was alive, but there was no signs. It looked so fresh. But whales don't just casually strand. There has to be something wrong with them.
A reason.
And yes, a reason they strand. And it was very weak, and so ultimately died. And when I said, well, I've got to really do a good job on this necropsy to try to find out why it died. And it was, it took a long time because I was trying to be so meticulous. And you usually go through and look at all the organs and what's in the gut, and lungs okay, and liver okay, and everything was fine. And so I was.
Let's put in another picture while you're talking about what you're seeing for everybody.
And
so everything seemed fine.
Everything seemed fine, and I was beginning to get really worried. And then at the last moment, I got up into this area here, and I found something that in the esophagus. The esophagus was swollen at one point, tissue necrotic, and when I finally opened it up to see, it had almost a fist size, not quite as big, but round, but about that long, wad of seaweed in there that was just packed solid, and that had wedged, and since they can't regurgitate, it couldn't get rid of it. So that was finally the cause of death. And I thought, oh gee, if I just had a broom handle to jam down its throat, at least it would have worked. But who knew?
Well, it's not even a whale. I've never heard of that whale until I read it in your book. I mean, they're very uncommon, I suppose.
Right.
And so, how incredible to come across a species like that here in Georgia on our beaches.
Oh, I know.
And I can understand as a naturalist, as a scientist, why you would want to find the answers. Why?
Again, if you're the only one going to see this, because there was no one else doing this here then. I mean, not just here on Cumberland, I mean in Georgia.
Let's show them another picture
So,
if you've got one.
Here's another one. This animal finally it was alive, stranded alive, a newborn right whale.
Oh.
And it got, the New England Aquarium was studying right whales, and they finally got a big front end loader out when it died and put it up in a truck and packaged it up and took it up to the New England Aquarium for good necropsy.
I mean, you've seen so much. I understand why you felt compelled to compile it all. I mean, there's nobody else who would have had these experiences, and
No.
and it's pretty incredible. I feel grateful that you did that. But you know, you have some marine mammals, and those are some things that you're interested in. But you focus mostly, I think, on other types of ecology.
Yes. Yeah, the marine habitat is rather hard to work with for me. I mean, I grew up in Atlanta, and so it just, and on land you can follow animals around, you can get their scat, you can watch them eat. There's a lot, I mean, you can learn a lot more from just observations, and so I'm much more interested in terrestrial ecology of the barrier islands, where you can actually make the observations yourself.
And what was that like when you moved here and you sort of started to discover these different ecosystems? And you know, because you're so drawn to terrestrial areas, is there a particular area that you really, or terrestrial stuff, is there an area of the islands you'd really like to explore?
Well, it's funny, because when I moved in my house, I realized that there's this many acres of what we call, or on the island we call scrub, which is flatwoods. It's a poorly drained area, very poor soil. It hasn't got a canopy, tree canopy. I mean, it's got a few scraggly pines, and it's got a few ponds. It's nice that way. It's well defined by nice. But it's not hospitable, because you can barely walk through it. It's very thick, scrubby stuff. And so I really felt cheated here. All this land is so close.
All of that undeveloped shoreline and the scrub.
Yeah, but here that's my backyard. And so, but then I realized that never having had agriculture, that might end up being a lot more interesting as far as plants and animals go, because it's less manipulated than the rest of the island. Because all the uplands on Cumberland have been farmed. Yeah. And so then I took a little more interest, and then after the '81 fire, which was a serious fire, I learned even more about the scrub, because it's a fire-adapted community. But I could go out, because it burns to mineral soil, and I could go out and walk around with my topo map and find all multitude of little ponds
that previously weren't accessible to you because
no,
of
you wouldn't. And by pond, I don't mean like a lake. I just mean a little depression. And
is that the same as a seep?
No.
Okay.
No, this is just a little, just like a hog wallow somewhere. I mean, it's nothing. If there's a lot of water, it fills up. Most of the time it's dry. But the interesting thing to me was that almost everyone had an alligator hole. And I'd go and I'd say, whoa, look at that. And remember, it's right after the fire. It's still very, very dry. And no signs of anybody home. I mean, you didn't see anything. There's no water. And I went to 2 or 3 of those, and finally I said, well, I wonder if there's alligators in these. And because I really like alligators. and so I got down and started looking, and of course your eyes in the sun and everything, and you have to get into about your shoulders and let your eyes adjust, and I'm down there looking, and I went, holy mackerel, because That's what I saw, somebody backing up
Looking.
from me. And of course he was there and he's wondering, oh, is this some rabbit coming snooping around? Whatever, how lucky am I? But then when he saw this big thing stick its head down, he just wanted to back. So that was just a big revelation, and something that appeared like such a sterile habitat with no life. And here's a not giant, these are, I'd say 4 or 5 foot alligators, because there's just not much of a pond. It's not much bigger than this area right here, maybe.
Wow.
So that was really
I'm
exciting.
so glad you shared that story with us. That was fantastic. Is there anything that you didn't include in the book, though, that, after you finished, you wished you had?
Well, can I show you a picture of the scrub first?
Of course. Oh, please. Please.
Let's see. Now this is a picture that I put in here.
I hope y'all can see that there.
Yeah, this light area is a large temporary pond in the scrub, but it gives you the idea of the openness of it, of the pines. You can't see how thick it is. Actually, you can see on this other page it's thicker, how thick it is. That's a mature scrub, pretty mature. It's just almost impenetrable. It's really not pleasant to walk through.
And you'd need to be in some boots like yours.
Yeah, you never know when you're going to hit water, because it is a very poorly drained habitat.
Well, in addition to that, we brought a few things, I think, today that maybe we can share. I know that there are a lot of things that you probably wanted to include in this book that you couldn't, because there's so much.
Oh, yeah.
But we do have a few items. Do you want to share these with everybody and tell them a little bit about it? I'll move this out of the way, maybe.
One of the things I just had to do, I mean, you spend enough time just documenting what you see terrestrially, but then when you think about it, you find dead fish on the beach, but you can't get into to studying or really listing and getting to know habits of all the marine fish. So that's one thing I left out. And marine snails or mollusca, I didn't do. But here's something from a fish. This is a sturgeon. They're very primitive fish, very hard. You can see that's just a piece of the skin that dried. And here's I've only seen one of these. Let's see, which way does it go?
I've never seen one of these.
This unfortunately, that should be up, but it just didn't dry that way. This is a mako shark, and this was just the jaw of it, just because the teeth were so incredible. I think maybe a side view is better, but these are so long.
Here, let's lift it up. Let me see if I can lift it right up and kind of turn it around, because that is...
You see, they have all these teeth, one behind another, stacked, because they're biting and tearing, fighting things. I mean, rough things, and they break them and lose them. So they're continually growing, coming up, and that's why they've got just so many. I mean, it's such a great design, right? Elephants do that too.
Thank you for sharing this with us. Right? Wow. And then,
like I said, the marine snails. I mean, this kind of shell, for example, an olive shell, and there are many, but this is a tulip shell, which is a pretty nice, hefty specimen.
Yeah, I mean, I've never encountered anything like that in my time here, and that is something many shell collectors certainly would covet. That's amazing. You just don't run across those every day. This is what your survey lends you to be able to discover when you're out there on a regular basis.
Oh, yes.
You know, the beach is renewed twice a day, right?
That's right.
That's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, a lot of people say, well, don't you get bored doing it every day? And I said, well, I don't do it every day. I couldn't do anything else if I did it. And
no.
You just couldn't. But it would be nice, but once a week is enough. I mean, there's a lot of information that then enables you to judge trends and what's unusual you know.
Well, and speaking of unusual, you know, or in that vein, have you come to new conclusions or new hypotheses since you finished writing your book?
Yes, and I probably always will. I'm a little slow on that kind of thing. Like we had, for example, we had free-roaming cattle on the island for a long time, and they were finally rounded up. And I mean, I didn't think much of it. I didn't know much about cattle. And I mean, I knew we didn't have many dunes on the island, and it was attributable to cattle grazing because they're different than deer, certainly. And but now it's only now that recently that I've realized that everybody used to comment on how park-like the whole island was, because there was virtually no grassy type understory. It was very clear, and anything new little sprouts coming up would get quickly eaten by cattle. So it was very, very different. But that was a slow recovery process. I mean, it took a long time to get to where now there are stands of things that will grow. You know, it's just thick, very thick, and so that made a big difference in the island. But it took me a while to realize that, not knowing cattle.
It took time to make that observation.
Yes, and if you hadn't seen it before, you might not. I mean, now you might attribute it to something else.
Like the horses.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you've worked and collaborated with scientists and researchers from all over. I mean, people like Archie Carr, Jim Lane, Ken Dodd. But I understand that the CDC even traveled here for the kissing bug, you know, related to the kissing bug. So you really have had everybody, but or had an opportunity to have experiences with all kinds of folks.
It's been wonderful, yeah.
In your history. But I wonder if thinking about that, you know, if you could sort of define natural history for us.
Yeah, what I mean, to start out, when it wasn't a popular topic. I mean, biology, there wasn't a lot of biology. There were a few unusual people that loved it and focused on it and everything, but all they could do is make observations, and basically that's what ecology stems from, is just observations. I mean, that's the basis. Nowadays we have a lot of experimentations and all kind of fancy biology, but the old-timey biology was just to see it and pay attention to it, and you might see it repeated, which confirms your initial observation, and that's what is really pleasurable to do. I mean, all the people, explorers that went out west and everything, you know, Lewis and Clark, all of them, that's what they're doing. A lot of their observations were based in natural history observations.
Yeah, it really is the foundation. All right, well, that being said, you know, I'm really curious to know a couple of more things, and then we're going to let you go because we're getting some iffy weather here.
Yeah, I see it coming.
Very quickly. So I just want to, you know, check in on a couple of things that we had received some questions about historically,
right.
If the weather will let us. And that's let me, hold on. Y'all bear with us. We really are doing our best given the circumstances.
Poor possum.
But, you know, there's an idea that deficit-driven research. Have you ever heard that term, or is it something you're familiar with?
That's a new one on me.
Okay, so it's kind of the idea that sometimes the people who are making decisions don't get enough information from locals and people who are, like yourself, intimately familiar with the ecology of an area. Do you think that could, you know, be relevant somewhere like Cumberland Island?
Quite possibly.
Well, folks, I think we have reached the end of our broadcast for today, and we will see you tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Perfect.